Margaret Bonds was born in Chicago on March 3, 1913. She was the only child of Estelle C. Bonds, a professional musician, and Dr. Monroe Alpheus Majors, a physician, writer, and political activist. Her parents encouraged her interest in music of all sorts and instilled in her a deep commitment to her community. Bonds' parents divorced when she was only 4, but she remained close to both of them throughout her life. From her father, she inherited a passion for civil rights and community engagement. From her mother, a solid musical foundation and arts education.
She was she was number one, a child of a civil rights activist, and therefore, from early on, she understood, the movement, the civil rights movement, and she had those feelings, those leanings to express the feelings of Black people during those times. And so we see her in the 60s and 50s, but 60s especially, expressing those things.
I do know that her mother's home where she lived, they would often have musical guests come there, stay there, visit. And in so doing, she kind of provides space for these connections to happen. And I think we probably don't even understand the value of some of those meetings, of some of those individuals who were able to get to know each other because of Margaret Bonds.
Estelle Bonds was one of the founding members of the National Association of Negro Musicians, and her home served as a gathering place for many of the leading artistic and literary figures in Chicago's African American community. Among them, Will Marion Cook, Countee Cullen, Abby Mitchell, Noble Sissle, Florence Price, and Langston Hughes. By the age of 13, Margaret Bonds had begun to compose. At age 16, she enrolled at Northwestern University, where she won awards both in piano and composition.
Bonds' first introduction to Langston Hughes was when she was a student. She was at Northwestern and went to the public library, and she finds his poem, The Negro Speaks of Rivers. And she faced a lot of racism at Northwestern as a student. So for her, finding this poem that traces the African-American journey via rivers and the hope at the end, she said that was what helped propel her through that difficult time in her own life as she was facing racism.
So that was the poem that she would read that really inspired her. So I think it's just fascinating that this was the poem that she would read, and it just rejuvenated her, made her strong enough to get through this, get her BN, get her master's there, and then go off to an amazing career. And then eventually not only meet with Langston Hughes, but become his friend and work with him. I know they did like musical theater pieces together that she would write and set the music for. I just think it's very fascinating. Langston Hughes kind of turns up in everyone's thing, but I think most people kind of forget just how integral I think Margaret Bonds was into that.
I think of Margaret Bonds as a very connected woman, a woman who knew the right people within the African American music community. And I think not only was she connected, she was kind of like a connector, and she would connect different people within the community. She was the one who introduced Langston Hughes to Florence Price.
Margaret Bonds was well known in her era. In 1932, she wins the Wanamaker Foundation competition. She's the first African American to solo with the Chicago Symphony, so she is known. And then she has a relationship, a collaboration with Langston Hughes that lasted the rest of her life. And so she had music that was very successfully performed while she was alive.
The most popular of her songs happen to be the ones that are most accessible in publication. 3 Dream Portraits, a song cycle of poetry by Langston Hughes, is popularly available in the Anthology of Art Songs by Black American Composers. It was originally published by G. Ricordi in 1959. Margaret Bonds had a close friendship with Langston Hughes. The poet's collection, The Dream Keeper, provided Bonds with the 3 poems of this cycle. They reflect on different themes related to being Black in America. The work is a series of mood paintings with many characteristics of the jazz style.
I think in this she chose poetry by Hughes that was much more nationalistic and had much more Black pride. The second song ends with Black like me, and the beauty of that, you know, just she's just louder about her Black pride.
You know, you can see the cultural influences in something like Minstrel Man in her cycle, where we see that, you know, she has the poetry of, she has the blues like feeling, she has a call response, you know, as if you think about what she does in answer to the Minstrel Man as he the singer sings. And she does this with all of her music.
My favorite moment is in the Dream Variations. They tell me to eat in the kitchen when company comes, but I laugh and eat well and grow strong. Maybe one day they will see how beautiful I am and be ashamed. And the way she sets, they'll see how beautiful I am. It makes me have goosebumps every time. I got to sing that with Kentucky Opera Educational Outreach, and we sang this for elementary school kids, middle school kids. I mean, really, I love the kids, but they're, you know, some of them are rowdy. They're like unruly. They don't want to be in the cafeteria, and they're sick and tired of opera singers yelling spirituals at them at 7 in the morning, 8 in the morning. But every time I sang that line, those kids were paying attention. And I think that means something, because what does it mean? It meant something when James Brown came out and say it loud, I'm Black and I'm proud. And it meant something when people started to say Black is beautiful, because it's a shame that that's resistance, but it is. Because so many narratives have said that we're not beautiful, that we're abject, that we're animals, that we are. And the fact that you set that heart-wrenching text by Langston Hughes, and it's just on a sustained chord, and it's sort of at the will of the singer how long they sing that and how they shape it. It's clear that it's for us to be able to practice saying how beautiful we are, because we need to practice saying that. So there's something just beautifully spiritual and affirming about that. Every time I sang that for those kids, I felt like I did something that contributed, that could be doing some good. It wasn't just singing something pretty, but that it was doing some legitimate good for these Black and brown kids that I got to sing this to. So yeah, that's what that piece, it comes to mind when I think about Melvin Bonds. This music is for us.
So I saw Leontine Price just after she had retired from the Met. She not just retired from the Met, she retired from singing opera, but she was still singing gloriously. This was in the 80s, and she came as part of, after her farewell, she was doing a recital tour, and I remember going to that, and I was duly impressed. And she, towards the end of the program, she did this whole American set, which included Minstrel Man, the first of the 3 Dream Portraits. She didn't do the entire cycle, but she did them as part of a group of other composers, including Lehoy B. and Ned Rorem. And when she got to that, the climax of that, because my feet are gay with dancing, you do not know, Dalton Baldwin, I died, you do not know, and Dalton, and then he goes out and she holds it. Oh, and then I heard that the whole hall, I swear to you, the whole hall went, whoa, whoa, whoa. It just zeroed in on her frequencies, and then she took just, and she stopped and said, I die, and my heart fell out of my chest. It was my first religious experience sitting in a performance. I had never experienced anything like that in my life. Now, I had enjoyed the performance up to that point, but that was transformative. That was something I've never, words fail. Words fail without becoming hyperbolic. For me to have had that initial experience through Margaret Bonds and through Leontine Price, I think is significant. I think it plays into, even if it's subconsciously, why I am as passionate as I am about certainly Black composers, but women composers.
I really got into like learning about Langston Hughes basically, from like the Harlem Renaissance, but also from his connection with Erasing the Sun, the play by Lorraine Hansberry. That was when I really first got introduced to who Langston Hughes really was, and how it's interesting. I believe that the Erasing the Sun came out in 1959, which is the same year as Margaret Bonds' Dream Portraits, which also came out in 1959. And it's interesting because they're all interlaid with this idea about dreams and the idea of what happens to a dream deferred. And it's just interesting how art kind of just layers upon itself like that to me.
When he had opportunities, for instance, with the World's Fair to do Tropics After Dark, she was a part of that collaborative team and was writing the music with him. They both, when he wrote the I Too and the Dream Portraits as partially a response to Walt Whitman during the Civil Rights era in 1959, talking about his poem of I Sing America, and Hughes is responding by saying, wait a minute, African Americans aren't in your vision of America. And so he writes his response. Well, she marries that beautifully with her music, the harmonic language that she uses, and the way she emphasizes the vocal line. It's just masterful. So their relationship lasted until his death, actually. And she was, with his death, she made a move in the early 60s to California because it was such a powerful relationship. She just couldn't imagine being in New York, I guess, anymore, and was enticed by some friends to move to California for the last few years of her life, and didn't do as much. She had to collaborate with other people, but there aren't as many songs from that last period because that was her, I don't know any stronger word than collaborated. It seemed like they were joined at the hip in terms of their thinking, and they were in lockstep. And a lot of songs, he's also a part of the musical creation. So it shows how much they were intertwined. And Langston Hughes was musically, it's so much of his poem talks about music. And although I know he wasn't always a big fan of concert repertoire, he allowed her to use all of those poems. with her concert repertoire, but her concert repertoire, even so, you can see the influence she has in jazz. And so he liked that. He would have liked her use of jazz harmonizations and the vocal lines that were quite operatic.
But there is a scholar at University of Massachusetts in Amherst who's written a book about, or kind of like cataloging all of the musical settings of Hughes's poetry. So, or maybe about the blues and that poetry. Hughes himself had relationships with many musicians. He and Margaret Bonds were such close friends that they wrote letters pretty much every day. It would, these days you text someone or you email them, but, or Facebook, and it's a real casual kind of, communication. The telephone was not easy in the 40s and 50s. You had to make a booking or have someone connected, etc. People sent each other notes, And so in the Beinecke library, for example, at Yale, you can read these two talking about, gossiping about people and what do I have for lunch, and I'm working on this poem and it's not coming together, or I'll have this score done by so-and-so and such and such. So there's that close friendship.
I moved to the East Coast to take a job, and I began coaching with a teacher by the name of Charlotte Holloman. And one day in my coaching, pretty soon after I started working with her, she asked me if I would be interested in looking at some repertoire she had by her friend Margaret. And Margaret, she didn't say the last name, so I didn't know Margaret who. So I went to the basement and I found the repertoire she was talking about, and it was manuscript scores. It was about 10 of them of Margaret Bonds that I had never heard of. I'd never seen a reference to these songs. And I hadn't done an exhaustive search, but after I got the music, I started looking, and there weren't references to this repertoire. So I was very fortunate. That's what began my journey with Margaret Bonds. And I should say it's led to, I know I have a virtual background, but this is the piano suite that includes Troubled Water. I published with Classical Vocal Reprint. So for the first time, the music is published. The whole suite, it's a set of 3 spirituals for piano. So I took on that project of now releasing that this summer. That's already out, and I'm finishing up. I have one permission to go for an anthology of songs. So I have about 50 or 60 songs, most of which have never been printed, including those initial ones that I found. What I've done in the years in between with that repertoire, I should say, was I did a recording of the 10 that I found on a CD of American women composers in 2000. And then I, talked about the music, lectured about it, sang it for all those years in between. And about a couple of years ago, I realized it was important that not only did I talk about this and sing it and record it, but people needed access to the music. And I had never published anything, had no forays into the publishing industry, but I took that, nor could I find the family for permission, because Margaret Bonds died. She had one daughter who died suddenly. And so I had to work hard to find the actual legal heirs so I could get this published. So I have succeeded in finding them and did get the first part. As I said, the spiritual suite has been published. I found a choral piece that is being published by Hildegard Press called St. Francis Prayer. It's gorgeous. I'd never heard of it. And then these art songs that I've been collecting for the last 20 some years. So I'm happy to share all of this with people now.
In addition to her activities in the realm of classical music, Bonds ventured into popular music. While in Chicago, she regularly played piano at the Palmer House Hotel and tried her hand at songwriting. Activities such as these increased when she moved to New York in 1939. Many of her songs, like Peachtree Street, tapped into trends in popular culture. Others confronted social issues connected with civil rights. The lyrics to 3 Wise Monkeys references the racist viewpoints of 3 Southern politicians.
Few of her pieces were published. For instance, Peachtree Street and Spring Shall Be So Sad, some of her popular things. Peachtree Street was a part of the 1939 Gone with the Wind movie. And so some of those pieces were published. The publisher Mutual Society has gone out of business. They've been subsumed by, different companies, eventually to Hal Leonard. Of her art songs, only the Dream Portraits, the 3 Dream Portraits, were published in Willis Patterson's 1977 anthology. So people knew that those songs. Everything else, there were a handful of spirituals and those 3 art songs and Troubled Water. Those were the main things of hers published. And yet the fact that her name still came to the surface as an important composer based on such a small output is a testament to the strength of her writing. And so that's why I'm so excited to now present the fact that there's 50 or 60 songs, not just the 3 that you've seen. It's a lot of them. And I have popular, spirituals, art, song, and musical theater in this anthology.
It was introduced to me 5 or 6 years ago for a concert that we did with Black females, including the pianist. I was asked if I knew the piece because it needed to be on the program, and I didn't know it yet. And I was politely shamed and was told that, like, you have to know this. This is like the soprano, Black soprano national anthem. We all know this. And so then I learned it, and now I know it. And now that once I became exposed to it, I realized how many times Black sopranos do program it and on their recitals and concerts. And it's just gorgeous. People want to hear it. And it's by a Black woman as well. So it's a wonderful piece to sing.
I mean, for me, it's timeless. She gives the Negro spiritual an anthem-like treatment with that piece. It is so majestic. It also feels very inclusive. The text is obviously, he's got the whole world in his hands, but it gives you this sense that we're all united, we're all together. Even that opening line that the pianist plays, it's almost like a call to unity. That's how I feel when I hear the first bum, 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 that happens at the beginning. I'm like, all right, here we are. It's just such a wonderful experience. And it's not even a very long piece, but she gives us something different in each verse. She colors the melody slightly different treatment with each verse, but not too far from the original He's Got the Whole World in His Hands melody. And it's gorgeous. It's a great closer for a program. And for me, I just love to sing that piece. It's probably one of my favorite Negro spiritual arrangements in general, the Bonds, He's Got the Whole World.
He's got the whole world in his hands. He's got the whole world in his hands. He's got the
did study with Nadia Boulanger, which many great composers of that period did. But the interesting thing was that she did not emulate Boulanger, and it was Boulanger who told her when she examined the Negro Speaks of Rivers composition that she didn't need her anymore. So it is important, because she is so respected, to have heard something like that come from Boulanger to Margaret Bonds. It lets us know something about her ability.
In The Negro Speaks of Rivers, she starts off in this imagery of the Euphrates River in Africa. And she paints that picture with this low plodding piano line that's repetitive, that sort of reminds us that the person speaking at the beginning that says, "I've known rivers," is ancient and otherworldly and not like us, that they probably come from someplace like Egypt or someplace more mysterious that we don't have as deep of a connection to as Black people in the diaspora. She creates that sonically. And then when she talks about the part of the text where he says, "I bathed in the Euphrates when dawns were young," she writes a very dramatic, high-sitting, operatic vocal line, where at the beginning was rather middle setting, not too high. And when she talks about, "I've heard the singing on the Mississippi," all of a sudden the piano playing sounds like a vaudeville joint with with almost an chuck piano part, jazz-like musical language. It's more jazzy, it's more blues-like. There's a part when, it goes, "Roll me to sleep," and you kind of lean straight into a blue note. And it's a completely different piece than from the beginning, where it's largely pentatonic and repetitive. So Margaret Bonds is able to paint such vivid pictures with her piano accompaniments, and not to diminish Florence Price's piano abilities, but you can certainly tell that Margaret Bonds was a unique talent on the piano, that she could tell these narratives just with the piano writing.